Now some news regarding AUKUS, and I've heard that next week Japan will become more involved, and that is through Pillar 2 of the agreement. Now, earlier this year, a statement was released by Defence Minister Richard Marles, US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin, and UK Secretary of State for Defence Grant Shapps that delivered a report card on AUKUS progress. So it was a year after the announcement of the optimal pathway for Australia to acquire nuclear submarines. And that statement included a reference to Japan. It said, recognising Japan's strengths and its close bilateral defence partnerships with all three countries, we are considering cooperation with Japan on AUKUS Pillar 2 advanced capability projects, the leaders said. Now, I believe Japan's engagement in Pillar 2 is already a done deal, essentially, and they'll be part of something in Australia next week. It includes quantum technologies, undersea capabilities, artificial intelligence and autonomy, cyber, hypersonic and counter-hypersonic capabilities, and electronic warfare capabilities supported by innovation and information sharing. Japanese industry is a global leader in technological innovation, and it has a record of producing insightful intelligence on emerging technology. And it's interesting, a former special advisor to Prime Minister Abe told sources AUKUS should evolve into JAUKUS by including Japan. Now, it definitely has not gone that far as yet, but I believe something will happen on our shores next week, potentially at HMAS Creswell. OK, joining me now to discuss plenty of very relevant topics, former Home Affairs Secretary Michael Pezzullo. Michael, so great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Erin. Nice to be back.
Now, you've been a little bit busy lately. In fact, you've written a couple of very strong pieces responding to some other pieces that were fairly critical of elements of AUKUS. What do you believe when it comes to the efficacy of this and how we still maintain control?
Well, first of all, Erin, I've agreed with a number of the critics of AUKUS that we need to stay focused on schedule and delivery. This is a very big, complex program. It's obviously very costly. It's intergenerational. It'll span the life and professional careers of many officials and industrialists working on it. So I actually agree that there needs to be more scrutiny, focus and debate about AUKUS at that more technical level. But where I part company with people with whom who I respect and with whom I've worked closely, including in terms of being advisors in their office, is the sense that AUKUS represents a break or a discontinuity in our alliance. Somehow we've now crossed the Rubicon, we've sold our soul, we're somehow much more committed without any consultation to automatically being involved in some kind of great power war should regrettably one break out between the US and China. I argue that we've already got an independent interest, we've already got a sovereign interest in making our own choices, in joining with the US, Japan. I heard your comment then about the possibility of an announcement about Japan and AUKUS too, which I think is terrific. And if that comes off, it's to be celebrated and to be acknowledged that Richard Marles and his officials in defence have done a terrific job if that indeed comes about. All of those arrangements, I think, should be pursued in our own national interest because we've got an interest, as does the US and Japan, in countering the establishment of China as a hegemon, as a dictating power in Asia. And so for that reason, we should be making our own independent choices to engage in such collaboration. And that's a sovereign matter for us. And I don't believe that we've sold our soul for 1 minute.
No, I'd have to agree with you there. And you are very well qualified to give an opinion in this space. Looking at current geopolitical situations, where we stand now with the Middle East, obviously a very significant US focus on the Middle East, and Kamala Harris saying that Iran is her perceived biggest threat. Are you worried about maybe a lack of attention and focus on China?
No, I'm not. I think, and I understand the comment that you've made about the Vice President's recent media comment. There's been plenty of commentary about her comment in American media, and I suspect that the policy of a Harris administration will be not much different from the last few administrations, which is really to focus on the Indo-Pacific as the decisive theatre and the prevention of the establishment of that position of being a hegemon on the part of China that I mentioned before. Where I think it is important, though, to focus on Iran, if not necessarily as the most significant threat that anyone faces, is the axis that's emerging very clearly across the whole supercontinent of Europe and Asia. We're seeing really quite troubling signs of China's support for the Russian war machine as Kurt Campbell, the Deputy Secretary, spoke about recently. Really concerning reports just this week from Ukrainian official sources that North Korean engineers have been found, in fact some have been killed, in the combat in Ukraine. Iran's been supplying Russia with drones. Both China and Russia are almost certainly supporting Iran in terms of its ongoing struggle with Israel. And of course, North Korea's got the potential to also attack in South Korea. I think the Americans are very focused on that entire ring of fire, if you like, of strategic fire, from Russia and Ukraine through the Middle East, not forgetting the prospect of conflict between China and India, and then coming up through the South China Sea all the way up to Japan. The Americans are capable and they have the bandwidth to focus on multiple theatres, but they also know how to prioritise. And I've got no doubt that the focus in Washington for many years to come will be China.
Okay, let's stay with Iran for the time being. And it's obvious that the IDF, they've undoubtedly weakened proxy Hezbollah, decimated the leadership, so to speak. Do you think Benjamin Netanyahu will target nuclear sites of the Islamic regime there?
Look, it's hard to say, and there's a lot of speculation, and Defence Minister Gallant just in the last couple of days has talked about a decisive and impactful strike about to come, saying that we will punish anyone who attacks us. So clearly something is brewing. There's also reports of the engagement between the President and Prime Minister Netanyahu in relation to calibrating and being proportionate and proportional in response. I think at a strategic level, there is no question that Iran is the spoiler in the Middle East. Until the horrific attack by Hamas on the 7th of October, and we shouldn't forget just how many Israelis died, and of course there's been just tragic scenes since then, including devastation in Gaza and now, of course, in Lebanon. The spoiler, the evil connecting point that joins all of those dots is Iran. And Iran is fixated on the annihilation of Israel, its destruction, and a nuclear program is part of that. And it's in everyone's vital interest to ensure that they don't get nuclear weapons.
Absolutely. Speaking of in everyone's interest, it's in everyone's interest in this country to have national security at a point where people understand the threat. One of the things that my dad, Major General Jim Mullen, used to speak about a lot, and I know with you directly as well, was our lack of fuel security, which people often don't realise is part of national security. Less than 30 days, say Israel attack Iran's oil, it just reiterates the fact that we do not have oil security, fuel security in this country. How do we change that?
Well, I came on this program, and thanks for inviting me back in May. That time has flown very quickly, Erin. And we spoke about both your father's legacy in terms of national security planning and the work that he was doing towards the end of his life and cut far too short on national security planning and mobilisation planning. And fuel was, of course, a critical element of that. At the time, you might recall, I'd also published a piece that talked about reviving civil defence planning across fuel and other essential supplies. We have to get on with that work. The prospect of war in our region is mercifully lower than in Europe and the Middle East, but it's significant enough to be doing work now. You and I talked about this in May. You subsequently wrote a column about the idea of having a national security statement that is something like a budget evening presentation where the government of the day says, look, using unclassified language, here is the best assessment we've got of our security circumstances using all the sources and methods that we have. Here are the key priorities that we're pursuing in diplomacy, military, civil defence planning, national mobilisation, fuel security and the like. And just like a budget, setting goals for the following 12 months so that 12 months later, you can have a prime time presentation back to the Australian people about how our security is progressing. I think you've written about this, and I really applaud the interest that you've taken in this. You've written a very good column on this. I think that the security and safety of the nation is as important as the economy. We treat the economy seriously with an annual prime time address with comprehensive statements and then updates through the year. We should do the same with security. And yes, fuel is very high up there. Whether we need 30 days or 40 days, it's certainly in that range. And fuel, along with a number of other essential commodities and infrastructure services, have to be secured. And that work needed to start yesterday.
Yeah, agree. Clearly, entirely. We're both very much on the same page. I put that to Peter Dutton last week, tried to get a kind of election promise out of him, and he wasn't too keen on promising millions or billions of dollars on the spot, but his response was very, very promising. Mike, just quickly, before I let you go, I just flew back in overnight from Jakarta. I spent a week there, which was amazing, and met with Pak Sugiono, who's likely to be the next foreign minister under Prabowo. He's been a loyalist to him for 25 or so years. How do you see that relationship playing out? And do you think we're not tapping into the potential of it, would be my take.
I think, and applause to this government building on previous efforts to have a Southeast Asia focus. I think that's terribly important. We should be pursuing relationships, people to people, trade, investment, business, language training, which has fallen off dramatically in this country, independently of these geopolitical dynamics. It's our home. So of course we should have a close, warm, productive relationship with Indonesia. Of course, the Prime Minister is at the ASEAN and East Asia meetings just this week. Absolutely important that we pursue that agenda. What makes Indonesia different is its size, Erin, and there's unfinished business there in terms of how we work together to secure each other.
Yeah, really well said. I'll give you one place where the language training is going very well. My big sister Sarah is the Indonesian high school teacher at Swan Hill College in Outback Victoria. So they know the importance of this relationship. Michael Pezzullo, you are brilliant. Thank you so much. I know how valuable your time is and really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Erin.